My son, Robert, called me with that hurried voice of someone who has more important things to do and said, "Mom, the birthday party is off. Something unexpected came up." I felt a knot tighten in my throat right away, a familiar feeling of being brushed aside. But I managed to reply that it was okay. A mother's heart, though, it doesn't listen to reason, does it? It told me to go anyway, to bring the chicken pot pie he loved so much, to give him a hug. Little did I know that hug would never be given. The door I would open wasn't to my family at all, but to the greatest disappointment of my life. The phone call itself was short, clipped, barely a minute. No real explanation, just that quick, dismissive tone. I could almost hear him sighing on the other end, already thinking about whatever urgent matter had taken precedence. My mind raced, trying to find an excuse for him, trying to rationalize it. Maybe Leo, my grandson, wasn't feeling well. Maybe Sarah, my daughter-in-law, was too tired. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We invent reasons, we make excuses, anything to keep the fragile hope alive that we are still needed, still loved. But deep down, a quiet ache started. It had been growing for a while now, this sense of quiet distance creeping into our lives. Calls were shorter. Visits felt less warm. It was an emotional coldness I'd tried to ignore, hoping it was just me, just an old woman's overthinking. This phone call, though, it solidified it. The birthday party, Robert's birthday. It was supposed to be a special day, a chance to remind us all what family means, a chance to feel that old warmth again. Still, that little voice, my mother's instinct, wouldn't let it go. It kept whispering, "Go, Helen. Go and check. Go and bring a little bit of comfort, a little bit of home." So, I did. I spent the afternoon baking his favorite chicken pot pie, the one with the creamy sauce and the flaky crust, just like Joseph, my late husband, used to love. Every stir, every chop was an act of hope, an act of love. I carefully wrapped it, still warm, and picked out a small, thoughtful gift I'd bought weeks ago. It was nothing grand, just something I knew he'd appreciate. I took the bus, like always. The trip felt longer than usual, filled with a nervous energy I couldn't shake. I kept picturing their faces, the surprise when I showed up, the grateful hug, Robert saying, "Mom, you shouldn't have," and then pulling me into the warmth of their home. That was the dream playing in my head, a mother's simple wish for connection. As I turned onto their street, though, a different picture started to form. My heart actually skipped a beat. There were cars, so many cars, lined up along the curb. And then I heard it. Music. Loud, upbeat music. Laughter. The kind of lively sound that spills out onto the street when a party is in full swing. My breath caught in my throat. I stood there, on the sidewalk, clutching the pot pie like a shield. My legs felt like lead. I walked closer, my steps slow, almost unwilling. I peered through the living room window just as the outline said I shouldn't, and there they were, everyone. Robert, Sarah, my little Leo, all their friends, relatives I recognized. They were eating, They were laughing. They were toasting, celebrating. The party hadn't been canceled at all. Not for them, anyway. It had only been canceled for me. My mind went blank. The world around me felt muffled, like I was underwater. I pushed open the gate, which was surprisingly unlatched, and walked towards the front door. It was slightly ajar, the sounds of merriment pouring out. I pushed it open gently, stepping inside. The music stopped. The conversations died down. Every single head turned towards me. It was like I had walked onto a stage, but I wasn't part of the play. They stared, wide-eyed, like they'd seen a ghost. Robert and Sarah, they went pale, absolutely white. Their mouths opened, but no words came out. No one moved. No one came to hug me. The silence was deafening, a physical blow. It was the most profound rejection I had ever felt. In that moment, standing there, the warm pot pie suddenly felt like a heavy stone in my arms. I could have cried. I could have screamed. I could have made a scene, right there in front of everyone. But a strange, cold calm settled over me. I chose silence. I walked towards the laden dining room table, a blur of food and decorations, and gently, carefully, placed my pot pie next to a brightly decorated cake that was clearly meant for Robert. I put the small gift next to it too. It was a quiet surrender, a silent acknowledgement of their cruel truth. Then, without another word, without looking at any of them, I turned around. I walked back the way I came, past all those frozen faces. They averted their gazes. Not one of them met my eyes. The silence followed me all the way out the door, down the path, and back onto the street. It was more cruel than any shout. I didn't need to say a single word to make me feel like a burden, an unwelcome guest in my own story. I walked away, leaving behind more than a cooling pot pie on a table already too full. I left behind the innocence of a mother who truly believed she was loved. What they didn't remember, as I walked away, was that besides being a mother, I was also the quiet guardian of a secret that would change everything. I'm Helen, by the way. I should have told you that sooner. I'm 73 years old now. My whole life, I was a seamstress. One of those quiet types who sat by the window, the hum of the machine a constant comfort. But you know, a good seamstress, she doesn't just mend clothes. She mends hearts too, often with a good conversation and a freshly brewed coffee. A listening ear. That was me. My Joseph, my dear husband. He passed away 10 years ago. It felt like a piece of me went with him. Ever since then, my world, it just narrowed. It revolved around one person, my only son, Robert. He was my focus, my reason for so much. After Joseph left, I sold my small apartment in downtown Toronto. It was a good place, full of memories, but I needed a change. All my savings, every penny I had, I used it to help Robert and Sarah, my daughter-in-law, buy a bigger house. A proper house, you know, with a big backyard, perfect for my grandson, little Leo, to run around in. That was my dream for them, for us. My routine. It was simple then. It was happy. Twice a week, I'd take the bus, a familiar journey, to their house. I loved it. I'd spend hours in the garden, getting my hands dirty, watching things grow. I'd make my famous pot pie, the one with the creamy sauce and the flaky crust, because I knew Robert loved it so much. And the best part? Listening to little Leo's stories. Oh, he had the wildest imagination. Those afternoons, those stories, they were everything to me. For me, that house wasn't just a building. It was the physical embodiment of a dream, our family's stronghold, our safe place. I remember telling Robert so many times, "My son, this house, it's our foundation, our roots. Take good care of it. Remember, it was built with your father's sweat and your mother's love." And I believed it truly. I gave them everything I had, my help, my time, and whenever they needed it, my money. My pension, it wasn't much, just enough to get by, but I made sure to stretch every dollar. I did without things for myself, so they wouldn't lack for anything. I always put them first. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We sacrifice. We give. We love unconditionally. I guess that's why it took me so long to see. I was so wrapped up in being helpful, in being needed, that I hardly noticed it at first. It started subtly, like a slow tide pulling back from the shore. Little by little, my visits began to feel like an inconvenience. And my savings? What was once a gift, freely given, started to feel like an obligation for them. I tried to push those feelings away, to tell myself I was imagining things, that they were just busy, that I was just being an old worrywart. But the chill in the air when I visited, the way their eyes would sometimes dart away from mine, those things were harder to ignore. They had forgotten something vital, something truly important. They had forgotten that the matriarch who had served them in every single way, who had given her heart and her home, also held the key that opened all the doors. It's funny how things start to unravel. It's never a big bang, is it? Not usually. It's more like a thread slowly pulling away from a seam. At first, you hardly notice. Then it's a little more frayed, a little more obvious. That's how it was with Robert, my son, and Sarah, my daughter-in-law. Everything just began to change, so subtly you could almost convince yourself it wasn't happening. Robert's calls, for instance, they started to grow shorter, always with the same excuse, always in a hurry. "Mom, I'm really swamped with work today," he'd say, his voice rushing, like he was already half out the door. "Can I call you back later?" He rarely did, or if he did, it was even quicker. A quick check-in, never a real conversation. Never that lingering chat we used to have, where we'd talk about everything and nothing. And Sarah, my daughter-in-law, she used to invite me for Sunday lunches, sometimes for a quick coffee. But those invitations just stopped coming. "Oh, we're just so tired this weekend, Helen," she'd say. Or, "We just want some time, just for ourselves." And I understood. Really, I did. Everyone needs their own space, but it wasn't just a once-in-a-while thing. It became every weekend. Every time I thought about suggesting a visit, I felt that unspoken barrier. Even little Leo, my grandson, my sweet Leo, who used to run to hug me the moment I stepped through the door, his arms flung wide. Now, when I arrived, he seemed different. Sometimes I'd hear Robert or Sarah whisper something to him just before I rang the doorbell. And then, when he opened the door, he'd just stand there, a little shy, maybe even a little distant. He wouldn't run for that hug anymore. Most of the time, he'd just go straight to his room, almost like he'd been instructed to. Leo has a lot of homework, Sarah would explain, or he's really into his video games right now. I'd nod. I'd pretend to understand, but a cold chill would run down my spine, a distinct feeling that I was in the way, a burden. I tried to talk to Robert about it, of course, my son. I tried to ask if anything was wrong, if I had done something. Is everything all right, sweetheart? I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light, not wanting to scare him off. But he'd always evade the question. It's all in your head, Mom, he'd say, a little too quickly. We love you. We're just busy. You know how it is. Work, bills, Leo's school. It's a lot. I wanted to believe it. Oh, how I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that it was just me, an old woman with too much time on her hands, overthinking things. But their actions, they said something else entirely. They were shouting, even if their words weren't. One afternoon, I was at their house, just dropping off some cookies I'd baked. Sarah was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low, but I could hear her. She didn't know I was there, I suppose. I heard her complaining to a friend. I just can't stand having to explain myself to her anymore, she said, sighing dramatically. It's too much. I froze. My hand was on the doorknob, ready to leave, but I just stood there, hidden from her view. I pretended not to hear. I really did. I just slipped out quietly, without a sound. But that phrase, that one little sentence, it kept nagging at me. It echoed in my mind for days, a bitter taste I couldn't wash away. The pain of that kind of indifference, it's a silent pain. It doesn't shout or scream, but it cuts deeper than any sharp word. I felt like an old piece of furniture, you know, one that no longer matched the new decor of the house. Useful once, perhaps, but now just taking up space. A bit dusty, a bit out of place. They didn't want me. Not really. Not anymore. But then they would still ask for things. Mom, could you help us out with this bill? Robert would call. The car needs a repair, and we're a bit short this month. Or Sarah would mention a school trip for Leo that was suddenly very expensive. And I, like the foolish mother I was, I always gave it. My pension wasn't much, but I stretched it. I made do with little for myself. I always gave them what they asked for, hoping, foolishly perhaps, that I could buy a little affection, a remnant of the family we once were, a small piece of that warmth they used to give me so freely. Robert's birthday was approaching then, just around the corner. I had this idea, a hopeful little thought that maybe a party, a surprise party, could fix things, could warm those hearts that seemed increasingly distant. I thought, if I plan something special, something just for him, for us, maybe it will bring us all closer again. Maybe it will remind them. It was a small hope, but it was all I had left. I started making plans in my head, thinking about his favorite cake, the decorations, the people. I truly believed a party could mend us. It could bring back the love we were losing, stitch by stitch. The call came the day before, a day I had marked on my calendar with a hopeful red circle. It was Robert's voice, hurried as usual, but this time with a note of something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Mom," he said, his words tumbling out quickly, "we won't be able to do anything tomorrow for my birthday. Leo isn't feeling too well, and Sarah is just exhausted. You know how it is. So the party's off." The disappointment hit me like a cold wave. It was immense. All those little plans I'd been making, all that quiet hope, it just shriveled up. I wanted to ask more questions, to offer to help, but his tone, it just closed off any further conversation. So I just said, "Oh, all right, dear. I understand." And I truly tried to. I accepted it, the way mothers often accept things that hurt them just to keep the peace. Even so, the next morning, I couldn't just sit still. My hands felt restless. My heart felt heavy. I thought even without a party, I can still do something. A mother's love, it doesn't just switch off because of a canceled plan. So I baked the chicken and cream cheese pot pie, the one he loved so much, the one with the golden, flaky crust. My kitchen filled with the familiar, comforting smell, but it felt different that day, tainted with a quiet sadness. I wrapped it carefully, still warm from the oven. Then I found the simple gift I'd bought for him weeks ago, a new book by his favorite author, and wrapped that too. I told myself, even without a party, I'll bring some affection, just a little visit, a quiet moment, a hug. Maybe I could cheer them up, make Leo feel better, tell Sarah not to worry. That's what I kept telling myself, pushing down the little voice that whispered they might not want me there. I took the bus, the pot pie carefully balanced on my lap, the gift tucked into my purse. The journey felt longer than usual, each stop a slow countdown to what I hoped would be a gentle, quiet moment with my family. But as the bus turned onto their street, my stomach dropped. There were cars, so many cars, lined up along the curb, all the way down the block. And then I heard it, music, loud, upbeat music spilling out from their house, and laughter. Oh, so much laughter. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It simply froze. It felt like a block of ice in my chest. I got off the bus, my legs suddenly heavy. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching that pot pie, staring. I looked through the living room window, my breath caught in my throat. Everything went still. Even the noise from the party seemed to fade into a distant hum. Everyone was there. Robert, Sarah, my little Leo, running around, laughing. Friends, relatives I hadn't seen in ages. They were eating. They were toasting. They were celebrating. The party hadn't been canceled at all. Not for them. It had only been canceled for me. My mind went blank. My feet, though, they seemed to move on their own. I walked through the open gate. The front door was ajar, the music and laughter still pouring out, louder now. I pushed it open gently and stepped inside. The music stopped. The conversations, the laughter, they all died down, like a radio being suddenly switched off. Every single head in that room turned towards me. They stared at me, wide-eyed, like they'd seen a ghost, not a mother walking into her son's birthday party. Robert and Sarah, they turned pale, absolutely white. Their mouths opened slightly, but no words came out. Not a single sound. They just stood there, frozen. No one moved. No one came to hug me. Not Robert, not Sarah, no one. The silence in that room, it was deafening. It screamed louder than any shout. It was the most profound, most public rejection I had ever felt in my entire life. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just walked slowly towards the dining room table, which was laden with food, plates, and a brightly decorated cake with candles. I placed the pot pie I had baked, still warm, next to that cake. Then I put the small gift I'd bought right beside it. My hands were steady. My face, I think, was blank. I didn't look at anyone. I couldn't. Then, without another sound, without looking at any of them, I turned around. I walked back the way I came, past all those frozen faces, past Robert, past Sarah, past Leo. Not one of them met my eyes. They all averted their gazes, looking down, looking away, as if my presence was a shame they couldn't bear to acknowledge. The silence followed me all the way out the door, down the path, and back onto the street. Their silence was the confirmation of everything. Standing there, walking away from them, I was no longer a mother, a grandmother, or a mother-in-law. I was a problem they had tried to hide, but which, stubbornly, inconveniently, had appeared. And the worst part, the part that twisted my gut, was that I didn't even know the real reason behind it all. I just knew I was utterly alone in that knowledge. On the way back home, the tears I had held back in front of them, the ones I'd swallowed down with that bitter taste of shame, they finally began to fall. But they weren't tears of sadness, not anymore. Not purely. These were different. They were hot, yes, and they stung, but they felt like tears of clarity. Tears that washed away the fog from my eyes. The humiliation, that public, quiet rejection, it finally woke me up. It was like I'd been in a deep sleep, the sleep of a mother who simply refused to see the truth, who kept making excuses, kept hoping against all evidence. That sleep was over. I arrived back at my small apartment, the one I'd kept after selling my Toronto place, a little nest I hadn't let go of completely. My hands still trembled a little, but my mind felt sharper. Instead of giving in to the pain, letting it swallow me whole, I found myself walking directly to my old wardrobe. It was a sturdy, dark wood piece, full of memories, standing there like a silent sentinel from my past. I reached deep inside, past the folded blankets and dusty hat boxes, and pulled out a small, heavy metal box. Joseph, my late husband, had made me promise to guard it with my life. He had been a man who thought of everything, a planner. I hadn't looked inside it in years, not really, not since he passed. I just kept it safe, tucked away, a promise kept. Inside that box, there were no jewels, no glittering fortunes, just old papers, yellowed with time, crinkly at the edges. The deed to the house where they had just humiliated me. Contracts, old bank statements, receipts. As my fingers traced the faded ink on those papers, Joseph's words, his voice as clear as if he were standing right beside me, echoed in my mind. "Helen," he'd said, his eyes kind but serious, "you are strong, but you have a soft heart. Protect what is ours, for one day you might need to protect yourself." And in that moment, holding those papers, it dawned on me. A cold, stark realization that made my blood run even colder. The house. The house where they celebrated without me, where they treated me like a ghost. That house wasn't theirs at all. Not legally, not truly. A strange calm settled over me then, a quiet, firm resolve. There would be no shouting, no accusations, no dramatic scenes. My response, my answer to their pettiness and their betrayal, it wouldn't be on the same level as theirs. I would act with the same calm, the same meticulous precision with which I used to sew a delicate fabric. Each stitch carefully placed, each seam strong. I took a deep, shaky breath, letting it fill my lungs, then slowly let it out. I reached up and with the back of my hand wiped away the last of my tears. They felt different now, no longer heavy with sorrow, but light with a new purpose. I began to organize the documents, laying them out on the small, worn table in my apartment. The deed on top, then the contracts, the proof of payments. Each paper a quiet testament. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten what I represented, what I had given, what Joseph and I had built. It was time to remind them, not with anger, no, but with the silent, undeniable strength of truth. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I now held all the threads in my hands. After that day, after I left their house, the house that wasn't really theirs, a deathly silence descended. It was absolute. No calls came, not a single message, no apology, not even a hurried excuse. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist for them. The world just went quiet, except for the hum of my own thoughts, the echo of that empty room. Their indifference, their complete lack of acknowledgement, it hurt more than the lie itself, more than the humiliation of that party. It was a silence that screamed their malice, their cold calculation. It confirmed everything. I spent those days at home, organizing Joseph's papers, the deed, the contracts. My mind was sharp, but my heart, it still ached with a hollow pain. I knew something was wrong, knew I had to be careful, but I couldn't quite grasp the full extent of it. Not yet. Then, a few days later, a necessary chore pulled me out of my quiet reflection. It was time to go to the bank, to pay my monthly bills. A simple, ordinary task, one I'd done countless times before. But this time, it was different. When I arrived, the bank manager, Mr. Henderson, a kind man I'd known for years, saw me. He called me into his office, a serious look on his face. He sat me down very carefully, almost reluctantly. He spoke in low tones, choosing his words with immense care, as if he was afraid of shattering me. He showed me some statements. My savings account, the one I kept for emergencies, the one Joseph and I had built up over a lifetime, penny by penny, the one I relied on for my old age. It was almost empty. I stared at the numbers, but they didn't make sense. It was impossible. I hadn't made any large withdrawals. I barely touched that account. But there it was, laid bare in front of me. Mr. Henderson, bless his heart, explained it gently. He showed me the dates, the amounts, monthly withdrawals for almost a year, all authorized by someone with access to my account. Robert, my son, Robert, who had access to my account to help me with my bills, as he had always insisted. He had told me it was easier for him to manage sometimes, to make sure everything was paid on time. And like a trusting mother, I had given him the power, the access, the key to my future. And he had used it. The money, Mr. Henderson explained, showing me some linked transactions, wasn't for urgent bills, not for my necessities. My heart started to pound in my chest, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. It was for expensive dinners out. Dinners I was never invited to. Designer clothes for Sarah. Fancy things she paraded on social media, things I'd never seen her wear when I was around. And then a payment, a significant payment, for their new car. The car they'd bought a few months ago, the one Robert had proudly shown me, saying how hard he'd worked for it, how much they'd saved. And then it hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The birthday party, the party I was excluded from, the one that was supposedly canceled because Leo was sick and Sarah was exhausted. The music, the laughter, the decorated cake, it was probably all paid for with my money, my savings, my old age fund. The exclusion wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just about making me feel unwanted. It was a cold, calculated plan, a financial one, to use me, to siphon off what little I had left until there was nothing. Nothing for my emergencies, nothing for my future, nothing for me. They were systematically draining me, financially and emotionally. I felt the ground open beneath my feet. The bank office, Mr. Henderson's kind face, the street outside. Everything swirled. The betrayal. It was complete. It wasn't just an oversight, a moment of thoughtlessness. It was deliberate. They not only wanted me gone, out of their lives, out of their way, but they were also stealing from me, taking the very last of what I had saved. The little nest egg I had for my remaining years, the pain it turned. It twisted into something cold, something hard, indignation, a righteous, freezing indignation that settled deep in my bones. I was completely alone, betrayed by the only person in the world I should have been able to trust, my own son, my own flesh and blood, the one I had given everything to. But it was there, at the bottom of that well of despair, of that cold, hard realization, that I found something, a spark, a strength I didn't even know I possessed, a quiet, unyielding resolve. It wasn't anger that filled me now. It was something far more potent. But it was there, at the bottom of that well of despair, of that cold, hard realization, that I found something, a spark. A strength I didn't even know I possessed. A quiet, unyielding resolve. It wasn't anger that filled me now. It was something far more potent. I knew what I had to do. It felt strange, almost foreign, this new firmness inside me. But it felt right. A few days later, I called Robert. My voice was steady, calm, perhaps a little colder than he was used to. I told him I needed to discuss an important family matter. Nothing more. He sounded hesitant, probably annoyed, But I insisted. It was important, I said, and he agreed. We set a time for that evening, at their house. When I arrived, the door opened cautiously. Robert and Sarah were there, waiting for me. Their faces were an odd mix of forced cordiality and thinly veiled tension. I could tell they were trying to act normal, trying to pretend that awful birthday party hadn't happened. They probably thought I was there to ask for my money back. Or maybe to finally make that scene I hadn't made at the party. I could almost hear the thoughts running through their heads. They led me into the living room, but I stopped. "Let's sit at the dining room table," I said, my voice quiet but firm. The same table where only days before my pot pie had sat cooling next to Robert's birthday cake, ignored. The same table where they had laughed and celebrated, pretending I didn't exist. They exchanged a quick glance, but they sat down, one on each side, leaving the head of the table for me. I sat. My purse was on my lap, my hands clasped over it. My heart, it was beating steadily, not with fear, but with a quiet, determined rhythm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I didn't even accuse them of anything. There was no need. Their guilt was a palpable thing in the air, heavy and suffocating. I simply opened my purse, reached inside, and pulled out the old folder I'd prepared, the one filled with Joseph's papers. I opened it slowly, deliberately. Then, with a gentle, almost reverent hand, I took out the original deed to the house we were sitting in, and I placed it on the table between us. It lay there, a crisp, official document, stark against the polished wood. "I imagine you don't remember this document," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor I felt deep inside. It was firm, though, unyielding. "When I sold my apartment, my small place downtown, to help you, the money I gave covered the down payment for this house, and a bit more. The rest of it, the larger part, we financed. But the financing and the deed itself were made out only in my name. Your father insisted on it, Robert. He always looked out for me, for us. He wanted to ensure I had a roof over my head for the rest of my life, no matter what. He always said, 'You never know, Helen. Always be prepared.'" The shock on their faces was my answer. Sarah went as white as a sheet, as if all the blood had drained from her face. Her eyes were wide, darting from the deed to me, then to Robert. "Robert, my son," he started to stammer. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Just choked, broken sounds. He couldn't form a single sentence. Their faces, usually so composed, so dismissive, were now a mask of pure disbelief and dawning horror. They had no idea. They truly had no idea. "This house," I continued, my voice still quiet, still firm, breaking the deafening silence. "This house is mine. The ground you walk on, the roof over your heads, it belongs to me. And from today on, things will change. I have already canceled your access to my bank account, Robert, effective immediately. And I will set clear rules for you to continue living here. Very clear rules. The first of which, the most important rule, is respect. I wasn't seeking revenge, not really. I wasn't trying to hurt them the way they had hurt me. This wasn't about anger or vengeance. It was about something far more fundamental. It was about the restoration of my dignity, my worth, the house that had been the stage for my deepest humiliation, the place where they had made me feel invisible and unwanted. It was now becoming the undeniable symbol of my power. And in their stunned silence, I saw that they finally understood. The game was over. The rules were mine, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly, powerfully present. The next chapter, I knew, would be entirely on my terms. The shock on their faces, it hung in the air long after I finished speaking. It carved a new reality between us, one I knew would never truly be the same. The dynamic, it changed completely. But let me be clear, it didn't become some kind of fairy tale. There was no sudden embrace, no magical healing. The love and trust I had felt for Robert, my own son, it was broken, shattered into too many pieces to ever truly mend. He and Sarah became tenants in my house. It sounds stark, doesn't it, to say that about your family? But that's the truth now. They pay a symbolic rent each month, enough to acknowledge the new arrangement, enough to make them understand they have a stake, but it's not a gift. They're responsible for the maintenance, the upkeep, and yes, they treat me with a respect they never had before. But it's a cold, calculated respect, born from the fear of losing their home, not from genuine affection. The distance between us, even living under the same roof, is enormous. A quiet, unbridgeable chasm. But for me, everything changed for the better. I regained control of my life, piece by precious piece. It felt like taking back something that had slowly, quietly been siphoned away. I went back to sewing for clients, not out of necessity anymore, but for pure pleasure. The rhythmic hum of my old machine, the feel of fabric under my fingers, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful. It was like finding an old, dear friend. I converted a small room in the house, one they rarely used, into my own sewing studio. It's bright and cozy now, filled with spools of thread and patterns. It's my sanctuary, a place where I can create and simply be. I also started reconnecting with people, old friends from church, women I used to share coffee and stories with, but who I'd slowly drifted away from. It was wonderful, like finding fragments of my old self. We laugh, we share, we pick up right where we left off. And I started doing volunteer work at the local community center, helping with their knitting circle. It feels good, to give my time, to use my hands for something meaningful, without any hidden agenda or expectation. It's a different kind of giving now, a healthier one. My grandson, little Leo, he doesn't hide in his room anymore. Instead, he'll sit on the floor, surrounded by my fabrics, drawing pictures or sometimes just watching me sew. We talk, real talks, about his day, about his dreams, about the little things that matter to him. Slowly, gently, we are rebuilding our relationship. It's a delicate dance, away from his parents' influence, away from the tension that still hums in the rest of the house. He is the only part of that family, that old dream, that still brings me pure joy. His innocence, his pure heart, It's a precious gift. I no longer feel alone or invisible. On the contrary, I found a strength in myself that I honestly didn't even know I had. It was always there, I suppose, buried under layers of motherly devotion and quiet sacrifice. But now it's out, it's alive. The house. This house that was once a source of so much pain and humiliation is now truly my home, my sanctuary, a place where I feel safe, respected, and most importantly, truly myself. I learned a very hard lesson that love, real love, cannot be begged for, and respect, you can't ask for it. You have to demand it. Today, I live with a peace I haven't felt in years. The peace of someone who knows her worth, who understands her boundaries, and who does not, will not, allow anyone, not even her own son, to diminish it. My soul feels clean, clear, and the path ahead, though different from what I imagined, feels open and full of possibility. My soul feels clean, clear, and the path ahead, though different from what I imagined, feels open and full of possibility. You know, sometimes life, it just throws us into situations, things that test every single limit we thought we had. It's like being pushed right to the edge where you feel so small, so utterly forgotten, as if everything you are, every story you carry, just doesn't matter anymore to the very people you poured your heart into. The ones you dedicated a whole lifetime of love and sacrifice to. It's a pain that doesn't really have a name, is it? Not one you can easily explain. But it's a quiet, deep ache. A feeling I think a lot of us, especially as we get older, come to know all too well. This sense of slowly fading into the background, becoming less important, less visible. It can creep up on you, this feeling, until one day you wake up and realize you're being treated as if your story, your presence, is just an inconvenience. From all of this, from the hurt and the injustice, from this strange new beginning, I learned something so profound, so simple, yet so easily forgotten: our dignity. It's our most precious asset, more valuable than any house, any savings, any family dream. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to take it from us. Not with lies, not with indifference, not with betrayal. They just don't have that right, especially not when we've given so much. My story, well, it happened to be about a house and a birthday party and a very painful betrayal. But it could just as easily be about so many other things, couldn't it? About a job, about friendships, about other family situations. The core, the real essence of it all, it's always the same. It's about that moment, that crucial moment when you finally decide you've had enough. The moment you stop accepting less than you deserve. When you stand up for yourself, even if it's just quietly inside your own heart, and say, "No more. My worth is not negotiable." And for us, you know, as we get older, sometimes that invisibility, that feeling of being a burden, it just creeps in. People forget who you were, what you built, the strength you still carry. They might start to see you as someone to be managed or a problem to be solved, instead of a whole person with a lifetime of wisdom and feelings. That's why holding on to your dignity, holding on to your voice, becomes even more important. Because if you don't, who will? And you? I wonder, have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should value you the most? The ones who should see you, really see you for who you truly are? It's a hard question, I know. It makes you think. But sometimes, facing those hard questions is the only way to find your way back to yourself. To remember that spark. To remember your own worth. It's not about bitterness now for me. It's about recognizing the quiet power that comes from knowing yourself, from protecting your own spirit, and realizing that even after everything, even after the deepest cuts, there's still a path forward, full of quiet strength and a new kind of peace, a peace that comes from truly honoring yourself. My soul feels clean, clear, and the path ahead, though different from what I imagined, feels open and full of possibility. You know, sometimes life, it just throws us into situations, things that test every single limit we thought we had. It's like being pushed right to the edge, where you feel so small, so utterly forgotten, as if everything you are, every story you carry, just doesn't matter anymore to the very people you poured your heart into, the ones you dedicated a whole lifetime of love and sacrifice to. It's a pain that doesn't really have a name, is it? Not one you can easily explain. But it's a quiet, deep ache, a feeling I think a lot of us, especially as we get older, come to know all too well. This sense of slowly fading into the background, becoming less important, less visible. It can creep up on you, this feeling, until one day you wake up and realize you're being treated as if your story, your presence, is just an inconvenience. From all of this, from the hurt and the injustice, from this strange new beginning, I learned something so profound, so simple, yet so easily forgotten. Our dignity, it's our most precious asset, more valuable than any house, any savings, any family dream, and no one, absolutely no one, has the right to take it from us. Not with lies, not with indifference, not with betrayal. They just don't have that right, especially not when we've given so much. My story, well, it happened to be about a house and a birthday party and a very painful betrayal. But it could just as easily be about so many other things, couldn't it? About a job, about friendships, about other family situations. The core, the real essence of it all, it's always the same. It's about that moment, that crucial moment when you finally decide you've had enough. The moment you stop accepting less than you deserve. When you stand up for yourself, even if it's just quietly inside your own heart, and say, no more. My worth is not negotiable. And for us, you know, as we get older, sometimes that invisibility, that feeling of being a burden, it just creeps in. People forget who you were, what you built, the strength you still carry. They might start to see you as someone to be managed or a problem to be solved, instead of a whole person with a lifetime of wisdom and feelings. That's why holding on to your dignity, holding on to your voice, becomes even more important. Because if you don't, who will? And you? I wonder, have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should value you the most? The ones who should see you, really see you, for who you truly are? It's a hard question, I know. It makes you think. But sometimes facing those hard questions is the only way to find your way back to yourself, to remember that spark, to remember your own worth. It's not about bitterness now for me. It's about recognizing the quiet power that comes from knowing yourself, from protecting your own spirit, and realizing that even after everything, even after the deepest cuts, there's still a path forward full of quiet strength and a new kind of peace. A peace that comes from truly honoring yourself. Now, as I sit here in my quiet little studio, surrounded by the fabric and the hum of my machine, I think about all of this, about how important it is to share our stories, to connect with one another. Because knowing you're not alone, knowing someone else understands that ache, that particular kind of hurt, it makes all the difference in the world. It's how we heal. It's how we find strength in each other. That's why these conversations, these moments of sharing, they're so precious. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm you're still subscribed to the channel and hit the bell icon.